city shielding more than 1 million undocumented immigrants from U.S. immigration enforcers. That could put the city on a collision course with the Trump administration. I want to talk about that now with Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us this evening.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Don.
Explain to our audience, what is a sanctuary city exactly?
Well, I don't use the term sanctuary city since it has no definition and it's primarily been used by anti-immigrant folks. But I will say that Los Angeles and other big cities have always been a place that are welcome to refugees, to asylum seekers, and to immigrants. Currently, 63% of our population are immigrants or the children of immigrants. And we've seen that be a core part of our economy. We've seen it be a core part of our security on our city streets. And we will continue to be a place of refuge, a place that immigrants can come to and where they can feel safe. No matter what the changes are that go into one administration or the next in the White House, we're going to continue to be a great American city that's filled with immigrants and very proud of that history and that present.
So it's fair to say that Los Angeles is not cooperating with the federal government on its efforts to enforce immigration law?
Well, we do all the time when there's a criminal and there is a court warrant that requires us to make sure that we hand folks over to immigration officials. We've done that consistently. But the policy that we have in Los Angeles is from 1970 under not a liberal police chief, but if you remember the name Daryl Gates, a Republican, a conservative in 1970, recognized that's not the job of local police officers, whose job is to establish trust with all residents, to make sure that they can be witnesses to crimes, that they can talk to their police. That's responsibility of the federal government. And our chief, Charlie Beck, said we will continue to have that policy. We will concentrate on street crime and keeping Los Angeles safe. We don't believe it's the role or the place for local law enforcement to be asking people solely what their immigration status is and handing that over to the federal government. That's a federal responsibility.
Let me tell you specifically what Charlie Beck said about enforcement. He says, we are not going to work in conjunction with Homeland Security on deportation efforts. That is not our job, nor will I make it our job. So are you in agreement with that position, Mayor?
Absolutely, that's my chief, and we talked about that, and that is my policy as well as his. And it's been the policy for more than 40 years here in Los Angeles. Part of the reason we've been able to bring crime down to historic lows is we have trust in all of our communities, great relationships with our diverse immigrant populations, and that's a core part of keeping America safe. That trust is even more valuable than what we see coming from the other side. And I would like to see assurances from the incoming administration that we're not going to see children ripped away from their parents in the middle of the night. We've seen that playbook before in other countries. We've even fought wars against that sort of action. We've seen dark chapters of our own nation's history where American citizens were deported in Operation Wetback from the American Southwest, full American citizens that were taken across the border and families separated. We can't afford that here in Los Angeles. We can't afford that in America. And we hope that this administration will not be engaging in those sorts of efforts.
Over the course of this campaign, we've heard so much about about the things that happen during have happened recently. Donald Trump is blaming sanctuary policy for many of the needless deaths, including the case of Kate Steinle, who was murdered in San Francisco. The accused is an undocumented immigrant and a repeat felon. How do you answer critics who point to this case and others and they say sanctuary is a bad idea?
Well, you look at the overwhelming number of people who are here undocumented, 1 million in Los Angeles County. And if you look at those numbers, and even native-born who commit crime, that's something that happens with human beings. And we should always make sure, whether somebody is here as an undocumented immigrant or as a native-born American, that if they're committing crimes and they need to be held accountable for, we need to make sure that the legal system works. But the idea of massive sweeps and deportations, we're experiencing an economic boom here in Los Angeles. A big part of that has been that under President Obama, many of these undocumented migrants have moved into legal status and seen their wages go up by 40% and lifted the wages up for all of us. To push them back into the shadows won't get rid of crime. To push them back in the shadows will depress the wages of our citizens here, as well as, of course, those individuals, and could risk the strength of our Main Street economies throughout the United States. 60% of our local businesses are started by immigrants, some of them that don't have documentation, and there's a reason why 65% of Americans want a pathway towards citizenship for our undocumented migrants. That seems to be the right solution forward.
The president-elect, though, is threatening to withhold federal funds from cities shielding undocumented immigrants. That's potentially hundreds of millions of dollars from your bottom line. Could Los Angeles afford to lose that kind of money?
Well, those are our tax dollars. We expect to continue to get those tax dollars back from Washington. We're patriots. We pay our taxes. We make sure that those come back. And nobody's ever defined, even in drafts of old legislation, what a quote-unquote sanctuary city is. LAPD officers, just like in New York and Chicago and any small town, shouldn't be immigration officials. That's the responsibility of the federal government. Just because we're not pulling people over by the way they look and asking for their papers doesn't mean that we're not participating with federal immigration authorities. We do that, though, in a lawful way. When a court gives us a warrant, and we're not going to spread fear, we're not going to divide families, it's un-American, and we won't stand for it here, and we shouldn't stand for it in America.
Mayor, are you seeing any more fear in immigrant communities in your city since this election?
Absolutely. I've talked with young children who are inconsolable, who are crying, not knowing whether their parents are going to be there when they wake up. People are having nightmares. People are worried whether or not at the schools their children will be grabbed, whether parents will be taken away, whether our local factories, businessmen who are wondering whether our local factories, because there's too many Latinos or Asians there, will be raided. This is bad for the economy. It's bad for our social fabric. It's bad for the security of our streets. We all want secure borders. We all want a pathway to citizenship. And there's a bipartisan consensus of that. What we don't want to see, and which is frankly un-American, is to see these sorts of raids ripping families apart, these kind of accusations based on what you look like or maybe how you worship or where you worship God. These things, we have to work hard in our cities to be the examples of love, of unity, of what America stands for, and I'm very proud of our city and my fellow mayors across this nation who are standing up for American values and challenging the administration to assure us